My best friend secretly pretended to be me online for 4 months. Kayla and I met when we were 13, which is such an awkward age to meet someone because you're not really a person yet. You're just a collection of insecurities wearing eyeliner and pretending you know how to act around other people. We met in middle school because a teacher paired us together for a history project neither of us cared about. I remember she had written all over her notebook in purple pen, and I thought she seemed intimidating in that effortless way some girls are when you're younger. Meanwhile, I was painfully shy and convinced everyone secretly hated me. Somehow, we became inseparable. By high school, people just assumed we came as a set, and honestly, they weren't wrong. If someone invited me somewhere, they usually asked if Kayla was coming too. If she missed class, teachers asked me where she was. We spent entire weekends together doing absolutely nothing important, just laying on bedroom floors talking for hours about people we liked. Stupid drama at school, our parents, our futures, all the emotional disasters that feel life-changing when you're 16. We grew up 4 streets away from each other in the same boring suburb where every neighborhood looked exactly the same. Same lawns, same sidewalks, same people gossiping about each other through half-open windows. We survived the same awful high school together, and over time she became the person I trusted more than anyone. When my parents almost divorced during junior year, Kayla sat on my bedroom floor with me while I cried so hard I couldn't breathe properly. When her parents actually split up the next year, I drove to her house at midnight because she called me crying and said she didn't want to be alone. That was the kind of friendship we had, or at least what I believed we had. When we both got accepted into the same university, it felt weirdly perfect, like our friendship had somehow survived every phase of growing up and was just going to continue forever. We were roommates at first before moving into separate dorms later, but even then we spent most of our time together. She knew literally everything about me. Not in a casual way either. She knew my passwords because years earlier I'd trusted her with them and never bothered changing them afterward. She knew my middle name, my security questions, my mom's maiden name, the name of my dog growing up. She had seen every corner of my life because I never thought twice about letting her. She had been through my camera roll 1,000 times. We'd sat beside each other laughing at old selfies and screenshots and ugly photos neither of us would ever post online. She knew which pictures I hated, which ones I secretly liked, which ones I kept private. I'm explaining all this because what happened later only makes sense when you understand how deeply I trusted her. This wasn't some random person online stealing information. This was someone who had slowly been handed access to my entire life over 6 years. The first sign was so small I almost ignored it completely. I was applying for a part-time job at a boutique near campus and opened my email to send my resume when I noticed 2 messages sitting in my sent folder that I definitely didn't remember sending. One was to a small clothing brand asking about influencer collaborations, and the other was to a local photographer asking about a shoot. At first, I genuinely thought I had just forgotten. I had been exhausted with midterms and barely sleeping, so I convinced myself maybe I sent them late at night and didn't remember. I checked my drafts folder thinking maybe I accidentally sent unfinished messages, but there was nothing there. The emails looked normal enough and honestly sounded exactly like something I would write. I remember feeling uncomfortable for maybe half a minute before deciding I was overthinking it, so I deleted them and moved on. A couple weeks later, I was at one of those crowded apartment parties where everyone is pretending to have more fun than they actually are. I was standing near the kitchen when a girl from one of my classes walked over to me. We barely knew each other. She smiled and said, "Hey, I saw your new Instagram, by the way. Cute concept." I smiled automatically and thanked her, but the second she walked away, I felt confused. I remember checking my actual Instagram later in the bathroom, trying to figure out what she meant because nothing looked different. I convinced myself maybe she was talking about a story highlight or a reel or something small and forgot about it. Then everything changed on a random Thursday afternoon. I was sitting in my car outside campus when I got a DM request from a girl named Priya. I almost ignored it because I didn't recognize her at all, but the first line of the message made my stomach drop immediately. "Hey, this is going to sound weird, but I think someone is pretending to be you." I opened it instantly. Priya explained that she had been talking online with someone she believed was me for almost 3 weeks. The account had my full name, my photos, my university, my hometown, everything. According to her, they bonded over music and classes and random personal stuff until eventually something in the stories stopped matching up. So she searched for my real account and realized the person she'd been talking to wasn't actually me. Then she sent screenshots. I still remember the exact feeling of opening them because it felt like my body reacted before my brain did. The account didn't just resemble me. It looked real. The bio sounded exactly like me. The captions matched the way I typed. The jokes even felt like things I would say. And then I noticed the photos. Some of them had never been posted online before. Ever. They were from my private camera roll. I sat in my car staring at my phone while people walked past outside, and somewhere nearby, somebody laughed and a car alarm started going off in the distance. But all I could think about was the fact that someone had built an entire fake version of me online and had been using it to talk to people. Not casually either. According to Priya, the account had been building relationships, asking for favors, and in some cases even asking people for money because of fake emergencies. I think people imagine moments like this differently. Like suddenly you become some sharp detective connecting clues together, but honestly, I just felt numb. My brain kept trying to hand me easier explanations because the real explanation felt impossible. That night, I showed everything to my roommate, Danny. We sat on the floor eating stale chips while I scrolled through screenshots trying to make sense of them. Danny is one of those extremely logical people who stays calm no matter what's happening. And after reading through everything, she looked at me and said, "Whoever did this knows you really well." I didn't answer because I already knew. The second I saw those private photos, I knew this wasn't random. Danny kept scrolling and said, "They know how you type. They know your stories, your interests. This isn't some stranger." Hearing someone else say it out loud made it real in a completely different way. So we started making a list. Who had access to my accounts? Who had seen those photos? Who knew enough personal information to imitate me this accurately? The list was painfully short. And every path eventually led back to Kayla. I fought that conclusion so hard. I spent 2 straight days trying to convince myself it could be anyone else. An ex, someone from high school, some random scammer. Literally anybody except her, because if it was Kayla, then I didn't even know how to process that. Then I found the message. I wasn't even searching for evidence. I was scrolling through an old dead group chat from high school trying to find a picture somebody had posted years ago when my phone glitched for a second and suddenly a private message thread flashed across my screen. Long enough for me to see a screenshot of my driver's license. My actual ID. And underneath it was a message from Kayla to a number I didn't recognize. This should be enough to get started. I swear my entire body froze. I read it over and over again before finally putting my phone face down on the table and staring at the wall for almost an hour. The room was completely silent except for the hum of the mini fridge in the corner, but my brain felt deafening. It was her. And weirdly, the first emotion I felt wasn't anger. It was grief. Real grief. Because in that moment, I lost the version of Kayla I had trusted for 6 years. Suddenly, every memory felt unstable. Every vulnerable conversation, every late-night drive, every moment where I thought she genuinely cared about me suddenly felt questionable. Instead of confronting her immediately, I went quiet. I know some people probably wouldn't understand that, but I needed certainty before I said anything. So for the next week, I gathered evidence. I collected screenshots, archived messages, saved timestamps, contacted Priya again, reached out carefully to other people connected to the fake account. And little by little, the full picture started coming together. The account had been active for almost 4 months. 4 months where Kayla had still been hanging out with me normally. We got coffee together, studied together, complained about professors together. The entire time she was secretly pretending to be me online. One afternoon during that week, I even met her for coffee while knowing everything. And honestly, that was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I sat across from her while she casually talked about some professor she hated, and all I could think was, who are you really? Because suddenly every memory felt fake. As I kept digging, things somehow got even worse. One of the people the fake account had been messaging was a guy I actually liked, somebody I had talked to Kayla about before. She had been talking to him as me for weeks, flirting with him, building emotional intimacy while pretending to be me. That detail genuinely broke something in me because it meant this wasn't just about attention or boredom. It was targeted, personal. She wasn't just stealing my identity online. She was stepping directly into spaces in my actual life where she knew I emotionally existed. I remember closing my laptop after discovering that and sitting on the floor trying not to cry. Because there's a specific kind of violation that comes from realizing someone used your personality like a costume. After about a week, I decided to go public. Not impulsively. I spent hours writing the post because I knew once it was online, everything would change. I carefully laid out the timeline, included evidence, blurred private information, and explained what happened without turning it into some chaotic public fight. I never named Kayla directly. I didn't need to. Within hours, people who knew both of us figured it out anyway. My phone exploded with texts, comments, calls, and DMs. Some people were shocked. Some honestly weren't, which somehow hurt worse. A few mutual friends admitted there had always been moments where something about Kayla felt slightly off. Tiny comments, jealous behavior, stories that changed depending on who she talked to. Nothing huge individually, but together it formed a pattern. About 6 hours after I posted, Kayla texted me. The message was incredibly long, full of explanations about how she was struggling mentally and never intended for things to go this far. There were apologies buried between paragraphs of excuses and attempts to justify what she had done. I read it twice. Then I put my phone down. And I never answered. People ask me sometimes if I regret that, but honestly I don't, because by that point I realized I would never fully know what parts of her explanation were true. Once someone proves they can convincingly perform a fake version of reality, it becomes impossible to separate honesty from manipulation. The fallout afterward was messy in ways I wasn't prepared for. Mutual friends split apart almost immediately. Some fully supported me while others quietly drifted toward her because people get uncomfortable choosing between accountability and history. There were also awful conversations I had to have with people she had contacted while pretending to be me. Some were understanding, but others were embarrassed and angry because they had shared personal things with someone they thought was genuinely me. Then came the DMs from strangers. Hundreds of them. And weirdly, those messages changed something for me because over and over people shared their own stories of betrayal. Different details, same emotional core. Friends stealing photos, partners exposing private messages, family members using their identity. People they trusted turning intimacy into a weapon. It made me realize how common this kind of betrayal actually is and how rarely people talk about it publicly, because betrayal from strangers is easy to explain. But betrayal from someone you love is confusing and embarrassing and emotionally complicated. It's been around 8 months now, and honestly, I can finally think about everything without feeling sick. Looking back, there probably were signs. Small moments where something felt strange, tiny flashes of jealousy, stories that didn't fully add up. But every single time I ignored those feelings because when you love someone, your instinct is usually to protect your image of them. I don't regret being trusting, though. I really don't. People act like trust is stupidity, but I disagree completely. The fact that someone abused my trust says something about them, not me. What changed is that I'm more intentional now. I pay attention to inconsistencies. I think more carefully about access. Not in a paranoid way, just in a healthier way. Kayla moved to another city a couple months after everything happened. I heard about it through mutual friends. We haven't spoken since the night she sent that message. Sometimes people expect me to hate her, but honestly, the truth is more complicated than that. Because despite everything, 6 years of memories don't just disappear. The late night drives, the inside jokes, the movie marathons, the phone calls when life was falling apart, those things still happened. That's honestly the hardest part to explain to people. Someone can hurt you deeply and still have once been important to you. Those truths can exist together. I grieved her for a long time. Maybe part of me still does. Not necessarily the person she actually was, but the person I believed she was. But I'm okay now. Genuinely okay. Because eventually I realized something important. Being betrayed doesn't mean you were foolish. It means you were sincere around someone who wasn't. And yes, that hurts badly, but it's survivable. The people who hurt you the most usually aren't strangers. They're the people who knew exactly where to aim because you trusted them enough to show them your vulnerable parts. And after something like that, you have two choices. You can become cold and suspicious forever, or you can rebuild carefully without losing your ability to trust completely. For a while, I almost became the first version. I considered deleting everything online and keeping everyone emotionally distant forever. But eventually, I realized that if I lived that way, then the damage she caused would continue controlling my life long after she was gone. I didn't want that. So instead of rebuilding walls around myself, I rebuilt trust in my own ability to survive disappointment. Because no amount of caution can completely protect you from betrayal. People are complicated. Some hide parts of themselves extremely well. But eventually you learn that even if someone breaks your heart, manipulates you, lies to you, or weaponizes your vulnerability against you, you'll survive that too. That's what I learned from all of this. Not how to become colder, Not how to stop trusting people, just how to survive discovering that someone you loved wasn't the person you thought they were. And honestly, that lesson changed me more than the betrayal itself ever did.